West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
In addition to meeting to describe themselves as the electors from the state of Wisconsin, even though they weren't, we subsequently learned that this group of Republicans in a state that Biden won, they put pen to paper. They not only declared that day that they were the real electors, and they were electors for Trump, they actually drew up forged documents in which they tried to impersonate real electors. They purported to be the actual electors from the state of Wisconsin. And they apparently sent them in to the National Archives and to the Congress as if they were the real electors. So we reported on that last month just before Christmas, and on the still live question in Wisconsin as to whether or not any of those 10 Republicans who signed their names to those forged documents, whether they could actually be prosecuted for forgery, for having signed their names to this document impersonating real electors. It's still an open question in Wisconsin. It's an open question before the state election board, potentially before the Milwaukee County District Attorney. So that's what we reported right before Christmas in Wisconsin. But now look at this. Politico reporter Nicholas Wu had the really good idea to file public records requests in multiple states, asking to see what officials in those states had handed over to the January 6th investigation. Look at these documents here. Turns out it wasn't just Wisconsin. On the left side of your screen, these are the similar forged documents from Republicans in Michigan, purporting to be the electors from the state of Michigan, casting their votes for Trump, even though Michigan voted for Biden. On the right side of your screen, these are newly unearthed forged documents from Republicans in Arizona. Again, purporting to be the real electors from the state of Arizona, casting their votes for Trump, even though in reality, Trump lost Arizona and Biden won. Now, in both instances, just like the documents we dug up in Wisconsin, in both instances, these really are forgeries. If you're a state that Trump lost and Biden won, the electors from your state are electors for Biden. But nevertheless, in both these instances, here's Republicans in Michigan and Arizona pretending to be their state's electors, pretending to be electors for Trump. And I can tell you, I mean, based on our previous reporting about what Republicans did with these forgeries in Wisconsin, in Michigan, it looks exactly the same. In these Michigan documents, it looks exactly like the forgery we previously reported on from Wisconsin, except it's 16 electoral votes instead of 10, and the names are different. Other than that, it's basically word for word and even matching formatting, matching fonts to the President of the United States Senate and the Archivist of the United States and the Michigan Secretary of State and the Chief Judge of the U.S. District Court in the Western District of Michigan, pursuant to 3 U.S. Code Section 11, enclosed, please find Michigan's electoral votes for President and Vice President. We, the undersigned, being the duly elected and qualified electors, no you're not, For President and Vice President of the United States of America from the state of Michigan, do hereby certify the following: that we convened and organized in the state capitol in the city of Lansing and performed the duties enjoined upon us. Being so assembled and duly organized, we proceeded to vote by ballot. For President Trump, 16 votes. Vice President Pence, 16 votes. They are purporting to be the duly elected electors of the state of Michigan. They are not. And then these 16 Republicans from Michigan all sign their name to this forgery, as if they really are the Michigan electors, and these really are the official results of the election in the state of Michigan. A forged document purporting to represent the real election results in that state. Again, that's Michigan. And again, it looks exactly like the document from Wisconsin. In Arizona, interestingly, the formatting is different there. And the Arizona Republic had reported at the time that this had happened, that Republicans in Arizona were trying to do something like this. But as far as I know, we'd never actually seen the forged documents themselves before now. But thanks to Nicholas Wu's reporting at Politico, here it is. Page 1 has the official state seal of the state of Arizona, and then that repeats throughout the document. The whole thing, oddly, has a notary stamp on it. Each of the signatures is notarized. But it's headlined, "The Seating and Voting of Presidential Electors for the General Election of 2020. The enclosed seating and voting electors documents amend the previously submitted documents." But whatever you've gotten before, these are the real ones. And you see the headline here, again, under the actual state seal from Arizona, "The Certificate of Ascertainment of the Electors." And then all the rest of the pages are each of those 11 Republicans purporting to be electors, each of them one by one solemnly attesting and signing their names to this document that says they're the real presidential electors from Arizona, and they cast their electoral college votes for Donald Trump and Mike Pence. Each one of them individually signed and notarized under the official seal of the great state of Arizona. These documents are forgeries. These people are not the real electors, both in Michigan and in Arizona, just like we saw in Wisconsin. The real electors in all these states were Biden-Harris electors because Biden and Harris won those states. But in at least these 3 states that Biden won, we now know and we can now see the forgeries that Republicans tried to pass off as real electoral certifications. So their fake votes could somehow be counted in the Electoral College instead of the real ones. And again, crucially, this was not just play acting. They were not apparently just drawing these things up to have like a little bureaucratic Christmas pageant in 2020 where they could pretend Trump really won, and wouldn't that be fun to play dress up and act it out? I mean, they actually sent these forged documents into the government, purporting to be real. They sent them to the Congress. They sent them to the National Archives. Nicholas Wu reports today at Politico.com that part of the reason we know that is that the National Archives last December forwarded the Arizona forgeries to the Secretary of State in Arizona, quote, "for your awareness." The National Archives making clear they were not planning to act on these forged documents, but the Secretary of State should know they exist. The Secretary of State in Arizona, Katie Hobbs, responded, at least in part, by sending a cease and desist letter to the Republican fake electors, telling them they at least really, truly needed to stop using the official state seal. Now, interestingly, we don't know what ultimately became of the forged documents that were drawn up by the Republicans in Michigan. We don't know of any response to them, for example, from the National Archives. We also don't know if they're facing calls for their prosecution the way their neighboring Republicans are in Wisconsin, right next door, where they tried the exact same stunt, apparently using the exact same language, the exact same font and formatting. How come these forged documents look exactly the same between your 2 states? Was somebody organizing this forgery effort among Republicans in multiple states to send in false slates of electors as if they were real? Because now we've got a hold of the forged documents they created in not 1, not 2, but 3 different states. Who believes we'll find more where this came from? Raise your hand.
It is Tuesday, the 11th of January of 2022. And you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef. And our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder. Tuesdays, a small scant dash, a mere pinch of hot smoked Hungarian paprika will make all the difference in the world. Well, how are you? It's Tuesday, and Monday was full of news. Wow. Boy, all sorts of stuff coming up. And stories that were reported on before the beginning of the year are being flushed out. Wow, that was something there. Because we did report around Christmas time, Rachel's reportage, her reportage of some reportage about, fake electors and signed elector letters, forged elector letter, a forged elector letter. And now at least 3, and there's more. Where there's a Republican legislator, there's going to be a forged elector letter. I think it's probably in all the states. Even here in Oregon, where Republicans really hold a distinctly minority status. Though their minority status doesn't belie the outsized belligerence that these sycophants go through or behave as. Yep, we got them here too, and we got our work cut out for us. The enemy is among us. Maybe the enemy is us. Well, it's a third. 71 million people are still a lot of people. Gotta tell you. And they all got guns. I was thinking about doing a survey on the town Facebook page and asking gun owners here in town if they thought that since they have guns that they have the right to overthrow the government of the United States. Because that's what they're there for. A woman who does some fabulous baking sometimes puts up these little shared memes, little quotes, inspirational quotes, and sometimes, they can be a little crass, which gets posted quite often on the other side, shall we say. And so she had posted something today about her opinions about other people's opinions about you are like shit, and I flush shit down the toilet. I don't play with it. Oh, did that get an uproar from some of the pearl clutchers. And it was quite funny because these same people who said, maybe you should just keep that dirt in your own page, tend to post fairly crass things themselves. But I don't know. Since this particular lady is a known liberal, everything's going to be suspect, right? And I did want to intercede and make the joke of like, don't worry, she's just playing the circle game, because that was a big uproar. We had some high school kids from a few years ago for their senior picture. They did the little Pepe white power symbol, the OK sign. And I made mention of that. I wasn't really privy to the deep-seated. Well, I was aware of the area, but here in town, I just wasn't that aware of how deep-seated the animosity towards America was, shall we say. So I just made mention that some people better talk to these kids. I mean, do they know what they're doing? And the first thing that came out of, well, I got to tell you, the people who were the most upset were the Nazis. And that's what I call them. I didn't call them Nazis then. I called them right-wingers. But they turned out to be much worse. Indeed, much worse. So the first thing that came out was that, they're just playing the circle game. Of course, by that time, we already knew what the circle game was. Let's kick the liberals. We'll just call it the circle game. Yeah, well, you know what? They're acting like little white power Nazis. Somebody ought to have a talk with them. Well, instead of having a talk with the kids, anybody who brought up that was the Pepe white power symbol was duly suspended from Facebook. I wasn't the only one. And it's not because of any belligerence on our part either. But getting back to the idea of having a survey in town of how many gun owners, and we would probably pretty much call them Republican gun owners, how many of them believe that they have the right to violently overthrow the government of the United States? And how dare they call themselves patriots? How dare they? It's the ballot, not the bullet. And yet they are taking the ballot away and saying that their bullets have more freedom of speech than our ballot. And this is after they insisted that all speech is equal. If you don't throw the book at the book-burning Nazi, the book-burning Nazi's going to throw the book at you, because everything the Nazis did was legal. Do not forget that. They use your laws, your social conventions against you. And that's what they are doing here to us. We're supposed to make nice with the Nazis? No, you punch the Nazis at every turn. I know. People will say, oh, well, you're like advocating violence by using such violent rhetoric. Well, excuse me. You don't get pacifist with a Nazi. Didn't work in the Weimar Republic. It's never worked. And when I say punching a Nazi, I mean punching them in their wallets. Punching them where they live. You know, you can punch a Nazi by throwing them in jail, too. You don't have to actually go up like that brave woman in Europe during a Nazi rally went up there and started punching Nazis with her purse. Literally. An old lady against these 20-some-year-old thugs. Skinhead thugs. The enemy is among us. The enemy is not us. Let's be clear about that. This is not American against American. These people have no idea or have no inclination to be Americans. They hate Americans. The only thing they hate more than America are Americans. The great unwashed masses with all their color. Oh my God, there's too much color there. They cannot stand Americans. That's why we had segregation. Because they didn't want to extend the idea of even being a human to who they forced into labor. They are such lazy snowflakes. They couldn't generate an economy without forcing people to work for free while beating the crap out of them and separating families. We're supposed to make nice with that. We're supposed to find some kind of common ground. There's no common ground there. And I know, what is the solution to it? Well, you know, we ought to enact a few, some people might call them draconian. I don't. I call it necessity. Germany had to say, you know, there's a limit to free speech, okay? There's a limit to the free practice of political activism. If you're a Nazi, you are not allowed to do that. Now, I will say what the Nazis did then is that since they were precluded from flying the Nazi flag, they would substitute flags. And what was those flags they would substitute for? Well, yeah, the rebel star and bars that we now affectionately know as the Dixie swastika. Because the Nazis in Germany were not allowed to fly the Nazi flag. They, you know, with the swastika, they flew the rebel flag. And I should remind folks, the Nazis didn't just learn how to be Nazis by following Mussolini. They learned to be Nazis by looking at the segregationist movement and the Confederacy of the United States of America. Disunited States, because that's what they did. And then to make nice with them, we thought, oh, well, we should make nice with them because they were kind of like our family. Sometimes you just got to disown family. They don't get invited to dinner anymore on the holidays. But no, we said, come on over. You will name some military bases after you, just to show you how we want to make amends. And we're sorry that we forced you into an economy where you didn't have to, where it was illegal for you to keep people enslaved. We're sorry. Here, let's erect some statues to your war generals, the ones that tried to violently overthrow the government of the United States and the United States itself. And what did they do? They had night rides with hooded night riders, killing black people for what? Voting. And then John Roberts gutted the VRA. And they're whining now that we're trying to take over everything with this illegal voting rights amendment. No, we're trying to go back to what we had. Because none of these Republican-controlled states would have been able to do any of their electoral reforms, quote, end quote, reforms. Because they would not have followed pre-clearance from the Justice Department. We're not trying to go make anything new. We're just trying to go back to what we were before all this was gutted, because apparently racism doesn't exist in the United States anymore, except it does. All right. So I'm supposed to believe the people who are birthers are now saying, oh, well, the election was stolen. They're effing liars, and they'll lie to get what they want. They don't care about the destruction at hand. I don't want to hear anything about law and order, because we know what they mean. They make up the law, and we better follow their orders. No, that's not law and order. We're a nation of laws. A lot of it is done by a handshake. If every time we extend our hand in a handshake and you slap us across the face, pretty soon we're going to kick you in the nuts. Keep it up. You want to rouse the sleeping giant from its slumber? Try us. In fact, you're getting damn close. Now, I make jokes, but I think that maybe it might be a good strategy. The gated communities are already built. They wanted to be separate from the rest of us, and they wanted walls like from the warlord European era. They didn't want to open arms to the world. They wanted to close themselves off. Well, we'll accommodate them then. The gated communities are already built. They have their little lake marinas and their little lake marina fountains, water fountains. They have their strip malls. They have their strip malls with a little Botox franchise going on. They even have bubble tea. Just to make them feel like they were worldly. Well, this is so much different than biscuits and gravy. They're already built. The guard shacks are even there. We'll just put a few sentry posts along the perimeter. There's lots of these gated communities. They'll feel right at home. But that's where they will be. Now, I've also mentioned that if that doesn't work, we still have Guantanamo. I'm not willing to give it up now. We need an extrajudicial space outside of the, quote, government and constitutional guarantees of the United States to keep these terrorists, don't we? We did since Bushco. We could repurpose it. All right. Enough conjecture. What's on the curated part of the show today? As we touched upon Rachel's breakdown of those forged letters by the elector impersonators, they even signed their names to it. How is that not felony election fraud? Why are these people not in jail? It's not as if legislators have never gone to jail before. I remember many scams. How about Abscam? Some people called that entrapment. But you know what? You take a bribe from somebody you think's, maybe from Saudi Arabia illegally, you get punished for it, don't you? Yeah. Well, they signed their names to it. I want to know who notarized it. You know, that notary public has to follow a certain level of ethics. How did they notarize a forged letter? There's a lot in that story, and I want to see some action. On the rest of the menu, Health Secretary Xavier Becerra ordered Medicare to reassess a big premium increase for a pricey Alzheimer's drug that has dubious effectiveness, by the way. Federal Reserve Vice Chair Richard Clarida is the third, count him, number 3, Fed official to resign after a trading scandal at the central bank. Yeah. The more money you have, the more, good qualities you're supposed to possess. Yeah, Greenspan. And the United States Mint has begun shipping quarters featuring the image of poet Maya Angelou. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Europol has been ordered to delete data not linked with crime. And a Polish official has been fired by the government after calling the nation's anti-Holocaust law stupid. Because it is. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. To the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the left of the chat room link is the link to our Patreon page. If you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, and if you could send us the equivalent of what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink once a month, it would be so helpful, and we would be so grateful, and we are grateful to those who have done so over all these many years. With your recurring patronage, it allows us to pay our bills and continue the continuous upgrades on software and hardware, because planned obsolescence is a business model as if it never stopped. Yes. Anyway, thank you for your generosity. We need it. And thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thank you, Tom. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime, and really try to get that linked up on Twitter and other social media platforms before showtime, but I'm not always successful, am I? And you can follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. And please pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. I should mention that if you are getting podcasts from Spreaker, or maybe even others, the archives may be limited on those platforms, so do go to the links provided, at least on the Spreaker page, and I'll have them on. Pretty sure I'm getting them on the show notes and links diary. But the Netroots Radio team page on the Internet Archive has all of the Netroots Radio shows. Well, we're still building and adding some of the shows as we come across them, because we have been broadcasting 24/7, 365. So shows that were produced through Netroots Radio will be in that archive, and those will be referred to as the Deep Archive at the Internet Archive. Kind of like the Wayback Machine, but I got to look into how we do that, because I think the Wayback Machine works more for screenshots and things like that. But nonetheless, if you can't find the Deep Archives on the platform that you're on, go to the Internet Archive, and the link should be provided in, well, where you might be landing on. Okay. Let's get into this first offering. I'm thinking about Sarah Palin again, about she's all upset about sex being pounded into our brains. I think she's kind of missing Todd right now. That's what I'm thinking. Anyway, as I've made mention here, earlier, the VP candidate who donned Dom leather. Remember that? She put on some leather and struck a dominatrix pose, and got some, I don't know, it caused incel reporters to report all of the starbursts. Oh, I'm seeing starbursts whenever Sarah comes on. Woo, woo, woo. Yeah, we know what those starbursts were. But she's complaining about AOC pounding sex into our heads. Come on, give me a break. That woman's whole shtick was, a little bit of, Indeed. Okay, this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is out of the Associated Press by Ricardo Alonso Zaldivar. U.S. Health Secretary Xavier Becerra yesterday, Monday, ordered Medicare to reassess a big premium increase that is facing millions of enrollees this year, attributed in large part to a pricey new Alzheimer's drug with questionable benefits. Becerra's directive came days after drug maker Biogen slashed the price of its $56,000 a year medication Aduhelm to $28,200 a year, a cut of about half. With the 50% price drop of Aduhelm on January 1st, there is a compelling basis to re-examine the previous recommendation, Becerra said in a statement about his directive to the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. More than 50 million Medicare recipients who pay the $170.10 monthly Part B premium for outpatient care will see no immediate change to their costs. But Monday's move could open the way for a reduction later in the year. The Department of Health and Human Services says it is reaching out to the Social Security Administration, which collects the premium, to examine options. Medicare's standard premium is rising about $22 this year, up from $148.50 in 2021, and one of the biggest annual increases ever. About half of that, $11, was attributed to the potential costs of having to cover Aduhelm at its original $56,000 price. Since the drug is administered by infusion in a doctor's office, the cost is factored into Medicare's outpatient coverage, not the separate prescription plan that pays for pharmacy medicines. Christopher Rugaber of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Federal Reserve Vice Chair Richard Clarida said yesterday, Monday, that he will step down this Friday, the third Fed official to resign after a trading scandal at the central bank that involved potential conflicts of interest. The announcement followed new revelations around Clarida's trading in a stock fund in February of 2020, when the coronavirus threatened to upend the global economy and the Fed was discussing extraordinary rescue measures. The New York Times last week reported that Clarida amended his financial disclosures in late December to show that he had sold and then repurchased shares in the stock fund within a matter of days. Previously, Clarida had reported only the purchases, which came a day before. Chair Jerome Powell said the Fed was prepared to support markets and the economy. The Fed had characterized the purchase as a simple portfolio rebalancing, an explanation that was undercut by the revelation of the initial sale. Last year, the presidents of two Fed regional banks, Robert Kaplan of the Dallas Fed and Eric Rosengren of the Boston Fed, also stepped down after their questionable trading was revealed. Although the trades complied with Fed financial ethics rules, they raised the possibility of conflicts of interest because the officials could have profited from the actions the Fed was taking at the time. Brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The United States Mint said yesterday, Monday, it has begun shipping quarters featuring the image of poet Maya Angelou, the first coins in its American Women Quarters program. Angelou, an American author, poet, and civil rights activist, rose to prominence with the publication of I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings in 1969. Angelou, who died in 2014 at the age of 86, was honored with the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2010 by President Barack Obama. And in this reporter's opinion, that was when the Presidential Medal of Freedom meant something. The quarter design depicts Angelou with outstretched arms. Behind her are a bird in flight and a rising sun, images inspired by her poetry. The Mint's program will issue 20 quarters over the next 4 years, honoring women and their achievements in shaping the nation's history. Additional honorees in 2022 will be physicist and first woman astronaut Sally Ride and Wilma Mankiller, the first female principal chief of the Cherokee Nation. Also honored this year will be Nina Otero Warren, a leader of the New Mexico suffrage movement, and the first female superintendent of the Santa Fe Public Schools, and Anna May Wong, the first Chinese-American film star in Hollywood. Well, that brings us to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Karen Hopkin. Doing science isn't easy. It takes an enormous amount of time and energy to collect and analyze data. At least, that's the way it usually works.
This is one of those examples that we joke that we can snap our fingers and get data.
That's because Saad Bamla and his students just wrapped up a study of the physics of finger snapping. They found that the right amount of friction is key to a successful snap. Their work appears in the Journal of the Royal Society Interface. Bamla's lab at Georgia Tech focuses on ultra-fast motion in nature.
Organisms can achieve really, really fast motions, and we're kind of curious about how they're able to do this and how we may extract those principles for perhaps synthetic systems.
Their science may be hardcore, but their lab meetings include time to be a bit more playful.
We have something called Super Happy Fun Time. And in this, we'll talk about something typically non-scientific just to kind of diffuse the situation after a typically intense scientific discussion that a student presents.
A couple years back, their talk turned to the movie Infinity Wars. In the climax of this Avengers flick, supervillain Thanos forever alters the Marvel Cinematic Universe with a snap of his massive metal-clad fingers.
You should have gone for the head.
But something about the scene left Bamla scratching his head.
And I said, you know what, I'm willing to make a bet that if you had metallic gauntlets like Thanos has, I would suspect that it's actually very difficult to store energy in a controllable way.
Energy that then has to get released quickly if you really want to snap. So Raghav Acharya, a student in Bamla's lab, set up an experiment.
He put some reflective dots on his fingers so that he could automatically track the finger movement when you take a side view video with a high-speed camera, just to be able to extract out the velocities and accelerations.
Because the first thing they wanted to know was, just how fast is this jazzy hepcat gesture?
We discovered that the finger snap takes about 7 milliseconds. To put that into context, that's 20 times faster than the blink of an eye. A blink of an eye is glacially slow. It's like about 150 milliseconds.
Even more impressive than its speed was its acceleration, which was 3 times faster than the throwing arm of a big league baseball pitcher.
So here we have a snap done by scientists. So we're no professional athletes. We barely go to the gym. And we're about almost 3 times an acceleration faster. So that kind of led to this question, how are we able to perform this seemingly extraordinary feat of acrobatics and human dexterity?
To find out, they started to fiddle with friction. First, Raghav and his grad student mentor, Elio Chalita, used some moisturizer to make their fingers a little more slippery. And they found that the resulting snaps were not so snappy. So then, they went the other way.
Counterintuitively, we thought, friction is great. Let's put some high friction rubber pads, thinking if I increase the friction, I'm going to get a louder snap, perhaps.
But that also squelched the snap, because you waste too much of the stored energy trying to get your fingers to slide past each other.
And so it turns out that in our experiments that we find that the skin friction is kind of this optimal sweet spot in this Goldilocks zone that gives you enough energy, but also detaches quickly to give you the snap.
And as for Thanos?
If you put copper thimbles, which we did to test the Thanos hypothesis, turns out that the compressibility of the finger pads is important as well. If you have these rigid surfaces, although the friction is the same as the skin, not being able to compress affects the grip and storage of energy. And so you get a very weak or not really a satisfactory snap.
Bamla wonders whether there's also something special about the shape of our hands that gives us this ability. Or can other primates do it too?
I have written so many emails to so many anthropologists, zookeepers.
He's even gone back to the movies.
What if I saw in Planet of the Apes, these apes sitting on top of a horse and snapping? Well, that would be okay for me because somebody at least imagined it, right? Maybe they did their homework. Maybe it was described in some journal somewhere by a naturalist.
If you've ever seen a chimp snap, please let Bamla know. In the meantime, he'll continue to pursue projects that captivate his curiosity.
Life is too short to do boring stuff. I think it's more enjoyable for me and the students to say, oh my God, like how cool is that? And I think when nature pushes the limits of physics and engineering, there are interesting things to be gleaned out of it.
Plus, you can explain your findings like...
My parents now get it. Well, I think they do.
For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Karen Hopkin.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. For an expectant mother, taking care of her developing baby means taking good care of herself. One way she can do this is by ensuring she gets vaccinated. If a woman is or might be pregnant during flu season, it's especially important to get her annual flu shot, preferably before the end of October. In addition, women should be vaccinated against whooping cough during the 3rd trimester of each pregnancy. Failure to get vaccinated places both mother and baby at increased risk for serious complications of these infections, including hospitalization and even death. If you're pregnant or planning to get pregnant, ask your healthcare provider when you should get your vaccines. Thank you for joining us on A Minute of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
The morning after December's horrific nighttime tornado smashed a huge Amazon warehouse in Illinois, killing 6 workers, corporate CEO Jeff Bezos issued a personal video message. Was he distressed and sorrowful? No, Boss Bezos was perversely giddy. That's because the narcissistic billionaire had not made the video to mourn the deaths, but instead had chosen this hour of tragedy to gloat to the world that his private space tourism business had just rocketed a small group of extremely rich thrill-seekers on a 10-minute joyride. The popular information newsletter reports that a grinning Bezos, dressed in a pretend astronaut costume, exclaimed that everybody involved was really happy. Back on planet Earth, though, the families and co-workers of the employees crushed when Amazon's cheaply built structure collapsed on them were not happy with him. It took Bezos some 12 hours after his self-congratulatory media event before he finally issued a perfunctory tweet professing to be, quote, heartbroken over the loss of our teammates. But they weren't lost, they were killed by a deliberate corporate culture that routinely cuts corners on worker safety to put more profit in corporate pockets. First, the building itself was thrown up quickly with cheap pre-assembled 40-foot-high concrete walls that collapse inward in a tornado. Second, Amazon's employees were expected to stay on the job that night, even though there was a high risk of tornadoes. Third, nearly all of the workers were classified as contractors, letting Amazon dodge liability for on-the-job harm. This is Jim Hightower saying, oh, and those dead workers were not his teammates, as he so cynically called them. Even the high-flying captain doesn't treat teammates as throwaway units, carelessly sacrificing their lives for a few more dollars in corporate profit. Howdy-ho, folks. Thanks for tuning in and sharing my weekly commentaries. Also, please join me for a live web show I host every other Tuesday, the Hightower Lowdown Happy Hour at the Chat and Chew Cafe. You can join the action live online as I chat with grassroots leaders and progressive sparklies from around the country. Go to hightowerlowdown.org/chat-and-chew to find out about upcoming guests and watch past episodes. That's hightowerlowdown.org/chat-and-chew.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. Today in Labor History, the year was 1912. This historic day marked the beginning of the Bread and Roses strike of textile workers in Lawrence, Massachusetts. The strike was led by the Industrial Workers of the World, the IWW. The state of Massachusetts passed a law reducing the work week for women and children from 56 hours to 54 hours. On this date, a group of Polish women at one textile mill opened their paychecks to find their wages had been cut by 32 cents. They promptly walked off the job in protest. Soon they were joined by many more workers. The strike swelled to over 20,000 strikers representing more than 50 different nationalities, shutting down most of the mills in Lawrence. The strike proved that it was possible to organize women workers and to organize across ethnic lines, two groups that many union leaders of the day thought too difficult to bring into unions. Despite police violence against them, the strikers stood strong. They won most of their demands, including a 15% pay raise. But why did the strike go down in history as the Bread and Roses strike? The line fittingly came from a woman named Rose. In 1912, Rose Schneiderman, a labor leader and suffragist, said, "What the women who labor wants is the right to live, not simply exist. The right to life as the rich woman has the right to life. And the sun and music and art. You have nothing that the humblest worker has not a right to have also. The worker must have bread, but she must have roses too."
Them again, our lives shall not be sweated from birth until life closes. Hearts starve as well as bodies. Give us bread, but give us roses.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 39 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high in the mid-50s. Clouds and some sun this morning with more clouds this afternoon. Winds light and variable. We did have spots of rain overnight. Some hit around us and some kind of hit us here at the mothership in Rogue River proper. But it looks like we won't be having much in the way of rain for a few more days. Mostly cloudy skies tonight, lows in the low 40s, winds light and variable with cloudy skies tomorrow, highs again in the mid-50s. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon have been updated. We now have increased our confirmed cases to 292,036, and our deceased have increased by 2 and now stands at 401. Pollen is rated as none here in Rogue River proper, though, and the air quality index is good at 33 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is low at level 2, so it's not all bad. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.4 inches, visibility is at 9 miles, and relative humidity is at 93%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 50 degrees and cloudy. Paris is 37 and partly cloudy. Rome is 50 and sunny. Kyiv is 20 degrees and partly cloudy. Kabul is 23 and clear. Hong Kong is 54 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 42 and clear. Sydney, Australia is 74 degrees and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is a crisp 47 degrees and sunny. And New York, New York is a bone-chilling 15 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Anonymous staff at the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The European Union Crime Agency has been ordered by the 27-nation bloc's data protection watchdog to erase information related to individuals with no proven link to crime. The European Data Protection Supervisor said yesterday, Monday, that Europol was notified of the order on January 3rd following an inquiry that started in 2019. As part of the investigation, the EDPS said it reprimanded Europol 2 years ago for the continued storage of large volumes of such data, which poses a risk to individuals' fundamental rights. It said Europol has since introduced some measures but has not complied with requests to set an appropriate data retention period. This means that Europol was keeping this data for longer than necessary, the EDPS said. The watchdog said it imposed a 6-month period for the assessment of new data sets and determine whether information can be kept. It gave the crime agency a 12-month delay to comply with the decision for data it received before January 4th.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Even more anonymous staff at the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A Polish diplomat charged with improving contacts with Jews worldwide has been fired after he criticized his own government's approach to replacing and regulating Holocaust speech, the foreign ministry said yesterday, Monday. Jaroslav Novak, the plenipotentiary for contacts with the Jewish diaspora, described a Holocaust speech law passed by his country's ruling party as stupid in an interview last week with Jewish News. Novak also said Poland should pass a law on property restitution, a statement implying further criticism of the ruling authorities, who recently passed a law cutting off the chances of restitution or compensation for those who had property seized by the communists. Among those affected are Holocaust survivors and their heirs. Foreign Minister Zbigniew Rau fired Novak on Saturday, the ministry spokesman announced on Monday on Twitter. He did not give a reason. The development comes days after Poland recalled its new ambassador to Prague after that diplomat criticized his own country in an interview, in that case in relation to Poland's approach to a dispute with the Czech Republic over a state-run coal mine. The ambassador spoke of arrogance on the Polish side, something the government spokesman called extremely irresponsible. Novak's dismissal followed him telling Jewish News that he believed legislation passed in 2018 seeking to ban certain statements about Poland and the Holocaust is one of the stupidest amendments that was ever done by any law. The legislation sought to fight back against claims that Poland, a victim of Nazi Germany, bore responsibility for the Holocaust. The law outraged Israel, where many felt it was an attempt to whitewash the fact that some Poles did kill Jews during the German occupation during World War II. The legislation originally called for prison terms of up to 3 years for attributing German crimes to Poland. It was later amended to remove the criminal provisions. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.